Good morning. Welcome to BIZBoost Talks Live. I'm your friendly host, Imran, the creator of BIZBoost. Top of the AM, 1 May 2024. Right now, we are broadcasting live from Los Angeles and Delhi NCR on 6 channels across X, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Today, it's all about new month, new vision. Let's talk culture, the power of storytelling, vision, and the upcoming documentary Pan AM: The Untold Legacy of Cirilo McSween. Behind the lens with our guest, Justino Cooper, the visionary filmmaker, producer, editor, and head of JOCMedia and Entertainment LLC, and its production banner KALEIDOSCOPE, which develops and produces commercial feature and TV projects. 20 years in business. Justin, welcome to the BizBoost Galaxy. The stage is all yours. Please share your story with the world.
Thank you so much, Imran, for having me. It's an honor to be here to share my story. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I am so excited to talk about my new film, Pan Am: The Untold Legacy of Cirilo McSween. It is what I consider a passion project. I learned of Cirilo's story back in 2019 doing consulting work for a Fortune 100 company by the name of New York Life Insurance. I learned early on in my work with them that Mr. McSween was the first African American hired by the company in 1957. And what is significant about that time period is at that time, African Americans were barred from certain types of employment, insurance being one of them. But he was very diligent in his efforts to break that glass ceiling. So becoming the first, I was captivated by his story, and with my background being journalism, I love human interest stories. So I did a deep dive on his background beyond what he did at New York Life by being the first, and quickly learned that he was very instrumental in the civil rights movement of the 1960s, working alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Jesse Jackson. He was the guy that if you got locked up, they would call him for the money to bail you out of jail. That was just fascinating to me. And then to learn later on in his life, he was a successful McDonald's franchisee owner in the Chicago area, and had about 11 or 12 McDonald's restaurants. And what was significant about that was in a few of his McDonald's restaurants in the Chicago area, the theme for his restaurants was the civil rights movement. So not only did he live through the civil rights movement, when you would go to his restaurants, you were able to like step into a museum of sorts to look back at all the progress that was made from that struggle for equality and civil rights for African Americans and for all people of color that we so appreciate having to this day. So that's a little backstory about the documentary. I'm really excited to be working on it with my producing partner, Brittany DeVries out of Panama. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be here to talk about it.
That's powerful. Let's talk about this debut feature, Pan AM: The Untold Story, Untold Legacy of Cirilo McSween. That sounds like an incredible journey in itself. So, what inspired you, to cover this remarkable story? And are there any specific highlights that the viewers should look into for it?
So, as I said earlier, with a background in journalism, I love human interest stories. I think all of us have interesting stories. We all come from somewhere. We all have overcome things, and we're all trying to get to what's next. Movies like Hidden Figures, where many of us learn that those few African American women were monumental in the NASA program. I think a lot of people didn't know about that prior to the movie. So movies like that, recent movies like Shirley and Rustin on Netflix highlight other key African American figures who did remarkable things that most people are unfamiliar with. So with the spirit of that, I wanted to tell a story about someone else who did remarkable things that is really, for lack of better words, a hidden figure onto himself. So that was my motivation, wanting to raise awareness about his story, and more importantly, what makes Cirilo's story so interesting to me is he grew up impoverished in Panama. He didn't have shoes until he was maybe about 10 years old. And the fact that he was able to have the wherewithal to pull himself up from his very low beginnings to become the successful figure that he became is a story of rags to riches. It's a story of the underdog triumphing in the end. And I think we all watch movies to see characters develop, to see where they start and where they end. That's the beauty of filmmaking and character arcs. But Cirilo's life wasn't a movie. He lived it in real life. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to highlight that in this film that we are producing.
That's incredible. Like we say, we all have a story to tell, and we don't need a permission from anybody to tell it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's about it. I would love to know about your vision and career and the incredible journey. Did you ever imagine that you would be just setting from Panama to Los Angeles to bring it to life?
Well, Panama's still on my travel bucket list. My producing partner, Brittany DeVries, she is an American citizen who currently resides in Panama. She's been there for years. I just saw her recently, and of course, she's asking me to come down. We're still in development for the project, so I will eventually get to Panama. But to answer your question, when I look back over my 20 plus year career, I always dreamed big. I always was a visionary person and a person that was very imaginative. I knew that I was going to go far, much farther than where I started out from. I grew up in a very rural, small town called Kingstree, South Carolina. It's a small town where, growing up, I thought to myself, of all the places that a person could establish a town, why did they decide to build this town here? Because it's very secluded, it's very rural. But I'm fortunate that my family, my parents, especially my father, was adventurous. So we got out of that small town frequently on vacations. So my father really gave me the travel bug. So I have taken those lessons and those experiences into my adulthood. In my own travels, I enjoy traveling. So Panama is on the bucket list. And no, I would have never thought in all my years of living that I would be where I am today. But I attribute that to great people like my parents and the great teachers that I had that educated me about the world far removed from where I grew up. So that gave me the runway to really take off, to see the world for myself. I loved hearing about the world, but to be able to become an adult and to be intentional about getting out and experiencing it and exposing myself to culture. And when I came upon Cirilo's story for Pan Am, it was a story that I could relate to because, like Cirilo, I came from very humble beginnings, and to have the initiative or the desire to move beyond where you started out from is a part of the motivation that I have experienced, and what I also want to convey in the film, that it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is where you're going and where you're going to end up. And we all have the responsibility of navigating that. So that's what drives me. Coming from rural South Carolina by way of Atlanta, where I really learned a lot about the industry before transitioning to Los Angeles, which provided a springboard in many ways for me to go global. So that's a little bit about my journey. And again, never would have thought I would have been here 20 years ago.
I love your thought. Like you said, the navigator, like we all have the inner GPS that we need to put into the right direction and pick a tail, connect the dots, pick the breadcrumbs, and like constantly refining the direction to see, to find our purpose, to find what fulfills us, to find what fulfills others. So being an artist, being a filmmaker, being like a producer and editor and everything, you have a huge responsibility on you. So uh, moving on, like you say, our vibe is creative and our vision is global, and I
Absolutely.
totally resonate with that. So Justin, you wear so many hats in the entertainment industry. It's like a one man show. How do you manage to be a film producer, editor, journalist, song supervisor, and all round creative powerhouse without losing your mind?
Again, I would have to give credit to my parents, particularly my father. Growing up in rural South Carolina, my grandfather passed away, and my father inherited the family farm. And I was about 13 years old, so I wasn't a little kid anymore. So my responsibilities grew, and my father really entrusted me to help him around the farm. So to do that, I had to be cross-trained in many different things on the farm, whether it was, and back then, to give you perspective, back then, my family farm, we grew tobacco. For people who aren't familiar with tobacco, tobacco is the dried substance that are in cigarettes and cigars. So our family grew tobacco. It is backbreaking work, where you wake up early in the morning before the sun comes up to harvest the tobacco by hand. So I had to learn how to harvest tobacco, or as we would say in South Carolina or down south, to crop the tobacco. I had to learn how to drive the tractor. The tractor was in the field with the workers, so they would put the tobacco harvested on the trailer behind the tractor. And from the field to the barn, because we'd have to cure the tobacco, learning how to turn on the propane gas, to turn the burners on, to cure the tobacco. So learning all of that, in addition to my father and my uncle were also creatives, and they were kind of visionaries before their time. Like my father was a very sought after photographer, event photographer in rural South Carolina. My uncle, his brother, was into video. So they would book jobs, primarily weddings. So if you had a wedding, you would call my dad to take the still photos. My uncle would be there doing the video. So I was both on the farm and working as an assistant to my father and uncle. So having to learn many different things with my father, how to set up lights, how to change batteries, how to change film in a camera, how to, set up a shot, that the photo is well, the composition of the photo is great. So those lessons, those early childhood lessons, I've carried throughout all of the jobs that I've had, even the jobs I had prior to working in entertainment. My first official job, I worked at KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I recall being 16 at the time. And when I was being interviewed, they asked me, like, what position did I want? And most of the times back then, most of the guys would work in the back, in the kitchen, seasoning the chicken, frying the chicken. I told them I wanted to learn everything from the front to the back. So I wanted to be able to, if I had to work in the back of the house, how to prepare the food. If I had to, work in the middle where, you're preparing food and handing it off to the person working the front counter. I wanted to learn the front counter, and I wanted to learn the drive-through, because being able to connect with people, even for those few minutes where they're ordering their food, you're still having a human interaction. And every interaction is different. You may have a great customer, you may have a horrible customer, but it all served its purpose in training. And I am of the mind that everything that we do is like connecting the dots. All those jobs that I mentioned, from the farm work to serving as an assistant to my father and uncle to working at even KFC, I'm able to apply those early life lessons to the work that I do with all the job titles that you say that I'm doing. So I don't lose my mind, because my parents have taught me structure. Like, there's lots of things to do. There's never a day where I said as a child, there's nothing to do. My father had things for me to do. As a man myself, there's never a day where I can say there's nothing to do. So how I don't lose my mind is I am a very well-organized person. So the use of calendars, writing things down so I don't forget, being very deadline oriented. And the deadline piece comes in earlier in my career. When I graduated or finished university, I got my degree in journalism. And in journalism, it's all about capturing the story and delivering the story on time, whether you're working daily, like on a broadcast news show or a weekly newspaper. You have deadlines and you cannot miss the deadlines. So all of that plays into the work that I do today. I work with many clients who want things yesterday. So oftentimes I have to be very efficient in my work. I have to deliver on time. So having these processes in place where I use organization is how I don't lose my mind. And the great thing about it is, being an entrepreneur, no 2 days are the same. I can tell you just today, I was putting some finishing touches on a website that I built out for a client of mine. So from building out websites to writing a press release or editing a scissor reel for my project or for talent, there's no monotony in the work that I do. And I think that is what drives my passion, that every day I have the opportunity to be creative, and people actually reach out to me for my help and for things that I would do for free. But unfortunately, I can't live in the world for free. So I'm grateful for the clients that bring me business and repeat customers. So with all the things that I do, organization is at the bedrock or at the foundation of how I don't lose my mind and how I deliver on time. And I like to say, I'm trying to think of the correct phrase for it. I like to under promise and over deliver. It's something like that. I want to make sure that my clients look good and that they have what they need when they need it. So organization is key for my success and sanity.
Yeah, over delivering whatever you promise.
Yes.
Never stop learning. Having eye for the details, eye for the art, and being punctual. It's like being visionary. It runs in the blood of Cooper family, right?
Absolutely. Especially being a man of your word.
Yeah, exactly. Because like if you say like words have a lot of power, and it can influence somebody, it can make somebody, it can break anybody. It's like power of words. So like we have all heard about the glamorous side of filmmaking. Were there any bloopers or behind the scenes antics? Like, would you like to share any hilarious moments or on-set mishaps from your time as a film producer and editor?
I would say, again, being organized, you do your best not to have bloopers or mishaps, but things do happen. One example for Pan Am, like I said, we're in development. Last year, I decided with my producing partner, Brittany DeVries, that we were going to go to Chicago to shoot some preliminary footage. So I set up like 3 interviews with 3 subjects to get their perspective on my subject. And we landed in Chicago, and we really didn't have much time to do any location scouting. You know, it was like get in, get out. We hired a skeleton crew. And I recall at one of the locations, we got there and we had to serve, we're the producers, but we're helping because we're independent. So it's not like we're sitting back and like pointing to people, telling people what to do. We have to roll up our sleeves and get in there and help. And I recall at one of the locations, we really didn't have a lot of interesting options to make the shot look good, but we settled on one shot, and we actually had to serve as like the production design team to set up how we wanted it to look in the frame. And because we were working on the clock, I had already told or set the expectation to the person who owned the location that we were only going to be there, 1 hour tops to do the interview, and maybe like 30 minutes to like break down. So realizing that when we got to the location that, okay, we needed to make some quick decisions to set up this shot, because we still have to be on time and getting out of here because we told the person that we were going to leave. So I think things like that as an independent filmmaker is what keeps it interesting. It keeps you on your toes. You have to think really quick. Another example, in my earlier days of my career when I lived in Atlanta, I was a spokesperson for a large hospital. And as a part of that job, I was the liaison who dealt with productions, large productions of various scales. So everything from the actual location itself to telling the transportation department where they can park their big rigs. And if I had like an early morning shoot where the call time was maybe at like 7 or 6 a.m., the working trucks would come overnight. And typically people go to sleep. So the working trucks, they're working to prepare for the early call time. And there was one night, the working trucks came maybe at like 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I am a natural insomniac by default. So I might have been up, and I got a call from the hospital to say, that TV film crew or that film crew that's working here, they've parked in the wrong place. And we need them to move. And granted, this was like in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. The location manager who was attached to the production couldn't be reached because he was asleep. But because I was the PIO, meaning that any bad thing that would happen at the hospital, in the neighborhood where the patients ended up at the hospital, I was one of the first to be called, to be ready to give a response to the press. But because this new portion of my job also required me to also be available at any time, I couldn't reach the location manager, and I did not have the numbers to the truck drivers. So I had to get out of my bed, drive up to the hospital in the middle of the night to instruct the truck drivers to the proper location as to where they needed to park. So it's like things like that. Like I wouldn't call those bloopers. Those would be more like road, speed bumps in the road that happen that you have to smooth over, and you have to do it with a sense of diplomacy and grace. So those are like two examples of earlier in my career in working in TV and film, and most recently, having to work as a production designer or set dresser for a shot I needed to get on camera.
Yeah. It's like getting through the bumps, like humps and bumps, and you don't have time to focus on what is the problem, but you have to find solution anyway.
Yeah.
You have to get it done anyway, and you have to put in a lot of discipline into it. Otherwise, who else is going to do it?
No one is going to do it, and everyone's looking at you for the answer.
Exactly. So, talking about your productions, working with Brittany DeVries and Seedling Media Productions on Pan AM must have been quite the adventure. So, any special moments or challenges that you have experienced while collaborating on such a passionate projects, and if, the audience would like to know something like they should look out for?
Well, I can say I think the story of how I met Brittany is interesting. So, with all the things that I have going on aside from producing this project, I had the blessed opportunity to work with a range of film industry professionals around the world. Since I want to say since 2017, I've had the pleasure of serving as the North American liaison to the Royal Film Commission of Jordan. So that simply means that I get to promote the Kingdom of Jordan. For those that don't know, it's in the Middle
I
East.
see your accent. I see.
Um, so the opportunity to represent Jordan, to like working on films like Aladdin, The Last Star Wars, Dune 1, Dune 2, I'm grateful for that opportunity. And I want to say the end of 2022, I had a meeting at HBO here in LA or Hollywood, and I was there to give information to an executive, Luis Lopez. I hope I got his name right. I'm drawing a blank right now. But Luis was an executive at HBO. And I was there to talk about Jordan and other locations that I work with. And Luis was so gracious to ask me, okay, well, thank you for that information, but what are you working on? And it's very rare for people to ask about you personally. And it's just business. I mean, people want to know what you're there for. What can you do for me? You know, how can you serve my mission, my objective? But for him to take time to ask me what I was working on, and it allowed me space to say, well, I'm working on this Panamanian project. Luis is an advocate for Latin American stories. So he said, oh, I know a producer who's based in Panama that you need to know. Her name is Brittany. So through his connection, I met Brittany. And after a few Zoom sessions, we learned that we were both on the same flight going to Cannes, France for the Cannes Film Festival last year. So we had an opportunity to connect via our layover in Atlanta. And that was our first in-person meeting. And it was at that time that I knew that I wanted to work with her. Because it's one thing to be virtual, but I still value in-person connection. And we were able to do that. And as a result of that, we were quickly able to get to where we are with the project. She brings a lot of experience to the table because she's produced past documentaries. So it really is, for the sake of just conversation, it really is a great creative marriage between us because she has the experience and information and knowledge pertaining to resources. And I bring my experience working on like large productions and the contacts that I have through working and networking over the years. So, and she's based in Panama. She really understands my vision for the project. And it's always great when you're able to align yourself with people who understand you as a person, and they understand where you're trying to go with an idea. So having great people on your team like Brittany makes a world of difference. So we're in the process. We just rolled out earlier in the end of quarter one. We began our fundraising campaign for Pan Am. As independent filmmakers, I wish it was just easy as having an idea and just going out and shooting it. But we have to pay. If you want it to look professional, you have to pay people for their craft. So we're in the fundraising stage of our film to raise capital to cover the cost of production and post-production. Our film is fiscally sponsored by Film Independent. So Film Independent is a leading independent filmmaker nonprofit organization. So our film is fiscally sponsored by Film Independent. So Film Independent fiscal sponsorship allows contributors, particularly specifically U.S. citizens and U.S. corporations, to donate or contribute to our project, and all of the contributions that they make individually or as a corporation are tax deductible. So we wanted to make it attractive. We wanted to ask for support, but through people's support, they also benefit because they're able to offset some of their tax burden going into 2025. So that's where we are with the project currently. you asked what's next. So aside from Pan Am, which I'm definitely excited about, and I'm excited for people to check it out. Also, aside from just the archival footage that we're going to include in the project, we are interviewing some amazing people. And the story will also focus on the legacy that not only Cirilo left behind, but how his surviving heirs are, how they have picked up the torch and how they're continuing his race. I'm interested in exploring those relationships because everyone has a different perspective or vantage point, and I'm interested in exploring that story. Between his grandson, his son, and his godson. They all loved him equally, and they all have different perspective on what they feel his legacy is and should be. So we're going to definitely explore that family dynamic in Pan Am, and that is what makes it an interesting human interest story. Yes, Cirilo was a great person, but we'll get to know him even more through the archival footage with him speaking in his own words, as well as hearing from his surviving heirs. Lastly, aside from Pan Am, I am currently developing two TV shows, one unscripted and one scripted. And my goal is to successfully pitch those, and hopefully they'll end up on, television soon. So that's what I'm currently working on, and that's what's coming next.
Sounds like an incredible collaboration and like working on the craft, an incredible journey. So you have already gave us a sneak peek into what's next in Justin O. Cooper journey. We would like to know, writing, editing, publishing, and featuring stories are few heavy tasks. As media pros, we have the power to shape a story or evoke emotions with just a few cuts or transitions. So what's your editing process like, and do you ever find yourself arguing with your inner perfectionist over the tiniest details?
Well, the editing process, it's I would say I think a lot of people who enjoy content, whether it's a 30-second social media Instagram story or TikTok, I think people who enjoy that, who don't produce content, they don't get to see how the sausage is made. So for something that might be 30 seconds, it may take you, 10 minutes to create a 30-second clip. So when you're producing content, where the final product is whatever the runtime is, there's so much more time that went into creating that piece of content. And I think for most people who assemble things, whether they're editors or people who work on projects, I think we all could understand. We all have that understanding that it took us much longer to make this than what you actually are watching. For me, as a storyteller, as an editor, I tend to jot down my ideas. So whether or not it's storyboarding an idea, or if it's me writing out a treatment that gives me step by step as to what's going to happen, in my first act, in my second act, in my third act, developing a roadmap. It's like anything, if you want to get to a destination, you have to know the steps that you need to take in order to get there. You just can't get on the road and just drive and just hope that you'll end up where you think that you'll be. You have to have a plan. So that goes back to what I said about organization. So even the organization that I had as a young kid working on the family farm, it still applies to my work as an editor. Because I'm up against a deadline, and in order for me to meet my deadline, I have to have a plan of how and when I'm going to start this, and what am I going to do along the way to deliver what the client wants, or in my case, as a filmmaker, what do I want this story to be able to project and portray. Yes, I am a perfectionist. So I do more, but I've learned through experience not to not to be married to the method, but to be married to the outcome. The outcome is telling a good story. And fortunately, through just this life experience of just living my own life, watching content of other filmmakers and people who produce television, you kind of have both an innate sense of what works, what feels right, what hits like emotional notes. And then there's the technical piece. So a lot of the creative talent I have is innate talent, like things I just know how to do really well. But education is always key. And for me, aside from my journalism degree, I have certifications in film and television development and film editing because it was important for me to learn the technical aspects of the creative process. So all of those things I put into the content that I create. So it's a lot of technical things that I have to check the box on as I'm, creating an edit. But it's also a lot of like feeling, emotion. We know that aside from what we're visually seeing on the screen, the sound matters. So making sure that, my microphone, if I'm recording something, my microphone is working properly. If I want to add like nuance, if I want to add like sound effects, if I want to, and all of that adds like texture and depth to what you're creating. So having a mind for that, and knowing, going with your gut feeling a lot is important. Even the choice of music that you incorporate into, what you're shaping. Like we know if you're creating like a horror scene, if it's a horror movie you're working on, you wouldn't select like comedy music to go with the scene because it wouldn't work. So just knowing what works, both from like a technical aspect as well as what just feels right to you, is all a part of my creative process as to how I get through any editing project that I'm working on.
That's incredible. The master of storytelling. I would call you a media maestro. Yeah. So, like, you have given us so much. Like, to wrap up, what words of wisdom would you like to share with the emerging producers and filmmakers and creative souls so that they can take over their journey forward?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a tough question. I think I'll end on 2 points. The first one is I would say I love to travel, and I think traveling is how you are able to tap into the fullness of your humanity. So even if you're unable to travel like I do, being intentional about reaching out to other communities of people that may be different than you, whether it might be a different race or a different belief system, and reaching out to them for understanding. Like, I think that is like enriching. I think that helps cultivate your ability to tell stories when you can understand how the world works outside of you and outside of the community that you are a part of. So being intentional about exposing yourself to culture, that is like one piece of advice that I would give. Another piece of advice that I would give is to never stop learning. Even though I've been doing this a very long time, I don't know everything. And I think if you ever get to a point where you think you know everything, you've already failed. So it's not uncommon for me to reach out to people that are more successful than I am. I'm fortunate to live in Los Angeles, where there are lots of successful people who I look to as inspiration, that I've cultivated relationships with, that if I call them to ask to take them to lunch, they will say yes to me. And I take the opportunity to ask questions, to get the answer. Because again, I'm trying to get to my next level. In order to get to my next level, for what I don't know, I need to ask for help. And asking for help could be something as simple as, how do you do this? This is my first time directing. I'm sorry, this is my first time producing a documentary feature. I've done lots of commercials, lots of short form things. A lot of it is transferable, but there are a lot of nuance and working parts that I've never had to deal with before. So having a network of people who believe in me, who will support me, who will answer my phone calls or my emails, or even if I have to take a workshop or class, I'm willing to invest in myself to get better at my craft. So never stop learning and be intentional about connecting with people that are different than you, because in both cases you'll grow. That's my closing two pieces of advice.
Awesome advice. I love the way you have a 360-degree vision, and you make your own craft, pick your own pieces, and you have to have a big picture as well as eyes for the details to make things happen. I think a question aroused in my conscious awareness. I see you are a spiritual person. Like, what kind of rituals do you have that keeps your mind, body, and soul organized?
I would say, well, I grew up in the South, and I grew up in a very Christian household. So that set the foundation, at least for me, as to how I show up in the world, as to how I treat people, those tenets. But as I have grown and become my own individual, through my intentional efforts to understand the world better for myself, through travel, like I have friends from all faiths, from all corners of the earth, and just being a person that is, I'm quicker to listen than I am to talk. So even doing this is weird for me because I'm used to listening to people. I would say being open to other points of view, and applying what you have learned through others, combining that with what you know to be helpful to you. All of that goes back to what I said about like the fullness of humanity. As we talked about earlier, everyone has a story. And I think because I keep that in the forefront of my mind, when I'm dealing with people, no matter where they're from, I understand that this person came from someplace. There are people that love this person. This person has desires for whatever it is that they want to go. And I think that is where I try to find connection. So that, I guess, that would be part of like my spiritual experience. And then I think that outside, at the root of belief, I believe that the greatest belief or the greatest religion, I would say, is believing in yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in yourself, you can't achieve anything in the tangible. You can't manifest or bring any idea from the realm of your mind into the realm of reality if you don't first believe it for yourself. Because you have to be able to believe it for yourself, where other people can catch the vision and buy into what you're believing in. So, prime example, Pan Am was an idea. It was like a little sparkle of an idea in 2019 when I learned about Cirilo's story. And the longer I sat with it, I felt like, why hasn't anyone told this story before? And the reason in my mind was because it was my job to do that. So it was my job to figure out, how do I take an idea that I have and bring it from the ideation stage into the plane of reality. So doing the work to believe that I could do it, and then finding partners like Brittany and being able to articulate and convey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, and having to have the passion behind it, because a lot of belief is passion driven. My friends that are Muslims, they are passionate about their faith. My Christian friends, they're passionate about their faith. So when you believe in something, you're passionate about it. So even in filmmaking, if you can't be passionate about that, you cannot expect people to buy into to that church of thought. So self-belief, believing in self, is very important, and it is at the center of, I would say, my spirituality, because whatever I want to do in this world, as you said earlier about the power of words,
Yeah.
that the things we think to ourselves, the words we tell ourselves, manifest in how we live in this world and what we produce, whether good or bad. So believing in self is very important to me.
That's powerful. It's like affirming, whatever goes into the mind doesn't exactly know if it's right or wrong or yes or no. It just takes it as it is. So it's important what we feed or what we consume. And I just love this session. Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing your journey and vision and experiences with us today. To all the viewers, don't forget to tune into JOCMedia and Entertainment. Let me remind you that Justin O. Cooper is an influential figure in the entertainment industry, skillfully merging his passion for global culture with an extensive career across film, television, music, and marketing communications. A big thanks to everyone for tuning in. Follow Mr. Justino Cooper on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can find all the links in the live description. Wrapping up this empowering interview, that's all for today's BIZBoost Talks Live. Remember, we are here to provide you a global stage with the maximum exposure and impact to support your growth globally, human to human. And you can drop a comment, tell a friend. So signing off, see you in the next session. Ciao, ciao.